Welcome everyone to the NAVALX Midwest Tech Bridge Small Business Event. You are in my living room. I am still hopeful that one of these days we'll all be able to be together, but in the meantime, just so grateful that all of you can be with us virtually. I can promise you it'll be worth your while today. So again, thank you so much. I know how busy you all are. I'm Julie Griffith. I'm with the Indiana Innovation Institute, and we're the proud partnership intermediary for the Midwest Tech Bridge. We've got a great lineup of speakers today. I know you're anxious to begin hearing from them, but in the meantime, a couple of housekeeping things to take care of. First, if you keep your phones and computers on mute, that would be helpful. We've had dogs barking, children screaming, including my own dog, not children, and some other interesting things happen over time, and it's funny. We enjoy it, but in the meantime, if you could keep that in mind. Also, we're going to get to all of your questions. If you have them, there's a chat function in the bar that you'll see at the bottom of your screen. Please use that. We will get to your questions at the end. So we look forward to receiving those, and I would encourage you please to write them as you think of them. So without further ado, we want to get started. Ann Fields is our first speaker. Ann is the regional director for the NAVALX Midwest Tech Bridge. She's been on the job since late February, and she's just been an incredible partner, and I'm happy to report, which I take every opportunity to report, that we are leading the nation in terms of our number of events and outreach, and it's really due to Ann's great leadership and that of her team. So Ann, if I could turn it over to you, please.
Hey, Julie. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. I see some familiar names and some unfamiliar names, so excited to see you guys all online today. Sorry, I just ran up a flight of stairs. I shouldn't be winded after that. Anyway, before we get started with the Midwest Tech Bridge overview, I wanted to invite the members of this meeting today to drop some comments in the chat, if you would, about any ideas you have for things that we might do better at the Tech Bridge. I promise we won't, it's not attributionary. We're not looking for, you know, anything specific, but good feedback, bad feedback, and also, really most importantly, we would love to know what your ideas are about things that we can do going forward. So if you guys have participated in some of these small business events, you've seen my presentation before, you've seen some of the other ones, but we try to have a new flavor every time. This one really kind of has a little bit of a SIBR flavor, which I'm super excited about. So if you have any ideas, is there a technical SME that you want to hear from? Is there a certain person at NAVALX? Is there somebody at ONR that you'd like to hear from? Really, the world is your oyster. Maybe some of them are not doable dues for us, but we can certainly try to get some things like that accomplished. So if you guys have any ideas for us, please do put them in the chat. And if you aren't wanting to do it in the chat, feel free to shoot me a note later on some ideas that you might have. So without further ado, let's get into the Tech Bridge overview. So I'm Ann Fields. We have Kyle Warner is currently our acting TD, and Captain McKay is currently our commanding officer. Thanks, Derek. Next slide. Okay, so if you guys aren't familiar with NAVALX, I think most of the folks on the line are. For the folks that aren't, I'm just want to do a quick overview. So NAVALX was initially kicked off in February of 2019 by the ASN RDA, Mr. James Hondo Gertz. And the whole idea with NAVALX is really to enhance agility, trying to get solutions to the warfighter faster and faster as effectively as possible. So there are a couple different facets at NAVALX. They have things called launch platforms, which is different sorts of kind of training events, human-centered design type events, things that Some organizations have done before and some haven't, so kind of an opportunity to bring the whole war fighting community together on how to do human-centered design and lean startups, agile process, agile scrum, that kind of thing. They're also great with awards and stories, so they communicate in a way that's a little bit different. Really active on LinkedIn. You guys have probably seen some of that if you're active out there. And then playbooks are really just best practices of things that are done well across the DON and how to replicate those items. And then, of course, that brings us to tech bridges. The idea there was that Naval X couldn't be successful if it was only in the Alexandria, Virginia area. And so they wanted to kind of replicate those sorts of processes and mindsets in communities outside of the Virginia area. Next slide, please. So this just gives you a quick overview of where the other tech bridges are located. One thing that I have learned since being in this position, it's really awesome to start seeing some of the collaboration between the tech bridges. We have some stuff in the works with the 401 tech bridge at Newark Newport. So really excited about that. So yeah, so there's a lot of communication, and the great thing about this too is if your tech doesn't really fit in what NSWC Crane does, it likely fits in some of the other tech bridge areas. So please get me that information, and I'll try to make the appropriate connections with the other tech bridge directors. Next slide, please. So the focus areas that we have for the Midwest Tech Bridge are on this slide. Really, it very much focuses around the expeditionary warfare, strategic missions, and electronic warfare, the three focus areas at Crane. So that doesn't mean that other technologies we're not interested in, but these are the 10 that the tech bridge is most focused in. So when we talk about prize challenges, when we talk about technology demonstrations, this is really the area that we're looking for technology in. We've had members of the ecosystem, communicate textile capabilities or wave therapeutic opportunities, which are all phenomenal. And we try to vector those people in a direction that we think would be valuable for them and for the DoD. So we try to make those connections. Sometimes my Rolodex just isn't deep enough yet. Hope to keep working on that. But yeah, so these are about the 10 that we're focused in, but if you're outside of that, please do communicate with me, and we can hopefully get you linked up in the right direction. Next slide, please. So we put together 4 success factors of what we thought would make the Midwest Tech Bridge successful. And all of this is kind of encompassed by an overarching theme of the so what is kind of like, let's get technology from non-traditional providers to, or traditional, but really focus on non-traditional folks who haven't engaged in Department of Defense activities historically. How can we get those folks participating and helping some of the toughest challenges that the warfighters are facing today? So all of these success factors are really focused on that overarching goal of how do we make these intentional collisions with the goal of helping keep our warfighters safe and dominant in that environment. So the first one is expand and engage the internal and self-explanatory. External is folks outside of the gate at Crane. So that's everybody, business, industry, academia, small business, innovators, everyone outside the gate. And then the internal, which one is very important to us, is the internal Crane team. So we have what's called the Midwest Tech Bridge Steering Group. And so we communicate with that steering group and ask them to provide their problems to us. So that's something that we're still very much working on. We've got a couple really awesome problems in the works right now. We have a radar lifetime extension project that's focused on microwave tubes. We're working on AI SUM, which is AI for small unit maneuver. There's an electronic warfare one that's probably in the works. So, and all of that is engagement with different organizations at Crane. So that's obviously a really important part. Without the problem owners, we're not going to be successful. The next was a collaboration space, and this is really an initiative that was pushed by NavalX, is to have the tech bridges be in a commercial environment that is welcome, for everyone's welcome there. So, you know, no gates, no guns, no guards. So COVID has kind of put a damper on that one, understandably. But our collaboration space currently is with the Indiana Innovation Institute, Julie and her team, at the Westgate Academy. And we actually just recently had a meeting there, socially distant, but we had a meeting, and it's phenomenal. So we're really excited about that. Once the pandemic environment goes away, we certainly plan to have some of these events there, and hopefully in some of the other ecosystems around the state and the region. The next is championing the NavalX innovation pipeline. And really, we can talk about this, or we'll see a video here shortly. But the idea of the NavalX innovation pipeline is to understand who those folks are in the external ecosystem. So the small businesses, the startups, the innovators, academia, understand where they're at with their technology, and try to figure out where that fits in with what we need on the internal network side of things, and trying to make those intentional collisions. So there's a couple different ways that we're doing that. But before I get into that, let's go to the next slide, Derek, and play the video.
For entrepreneurs, startups, and small businesses, it can be tough to partner with large organizations. It takes vast personal networks, years of experience, and oftentimes some luck to get your product delivered. That's why we created NavalX Tech Bridges, to help get your ideas and technology directly to those in the Navy and Marine Corps who need it, fast. Our Tech Bridge network is deeply embedded with sailors, Marines, academia, and innovators in the private sector. That means we are uniquely positioned to connect problem owners with solution providers, and to drive their products where they need to go. We've mapped our vast network of naval programs across the innovation pipeline, so you always know where you are, where you need to go, and who will help get you there. That way, you can better manage your resources and chart the most effective course to delivering your product. For more information, visit our website and let us know what you need. Your next opportunity is closer than you think.
Thanks, Derek. You're the best. So that video kind of illustrates each member of the external ecosystem that is hoping or seeking to do business with the Department of Defense is at a different place. You know, from the certifications that are required, to the relationships that need to be developed, to the understanding how it works and how to participate, to the vast number of programs that are out there within the Department of Defense. We are trying to make it easier. So obviously it's not a one size fits all kind of solution. It's let's have a conversation on the phone, figure out what the goals are, figure out how we can help, figure out the best way to vector people, and try to make that happen. So we spend some time each week. Julie Griffith, Julie Shaft, my deputy director, who's awesome. We spend time talking with members from the external ecosystem every week to try to work on this. And this is something that's always growing and developing. The NavalX team is actually working on a platform currently that would be really awesome, where you could click on I am a small business, click on that, and then say I have this kind of technology, click on that, and then I'm in this region, and it would populate all of the different, a comprehensive list of the different opportunities within that ecosystem, or opportunities available to that specific small business. So that's in the works. I'm really excited about when that might happen. So stay tuned, but if we haven't connected one-on-one, let's do that and see if there's something that we can kind of help vector in the right direction. Next slide, please. So the fourth success factor that we've identified, and probably the most robust, is the calendar of events. So since we started, we've done quite a few, 7 or 8 events. And these are the different types of events that they are: small business, technology demonstration, technology showcases, and innovation challenge. We haven't done much on the technology showcase yet. We plan to. That's really focused around IP and technology out of Crane. And Jenna Dix is our T2 director, and she's phenomenal. And that's sort of in her lane. We really need to, for next year, we're really going to start doing more of that on the Tech Bridge side of things. This year, we focused on small business events, much like the one we have today. We tried to make, or are trying to make them very educational, which is kind of why my plug in the beginning for please provide thoughts on what you guys think we should do next. But focused on opportunities within the ecosystem, how to do business with Crane. We've had the Purdue MEP, we've had venture capital firms, we've had PTAC, which they're here today, Matt Burkett with the small business, Jenna Dix. So we've tried to get a broad understanding of what's available in the ecosystem. Technology demonstrations, those are really where solution providers, so members from the external ecosystem, present their capabilities to the problem owners. So outside members presenting to internal folks, internal government folks, to see if there's some sort of connection or synergies that can be made between the problems at Crane and the opportunities within the ecosystem. We've done a couple of those. And then the innovation challenge is really the antithesis of the technology demonstration, where we are sharing our problem widely with the hopes that folks from the ecosystem will write on that and help us solve that problem. So I guess a couple things on the innovation challenge. We have a couple coming up, which we're really excited about. The hackathon is coming up shortly. And then, of course, the AI SUM event, we're hoping to have a prize challenge roll out within the next couple of months. So please stay tuned on that one. Next slide, please. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. I'm sorry for those of you who have heard it before. I hope it wasn't too redundant. The only other thing that I want to mention is because this event today has a little bit of a cyber flavor, we do have members from our Chief Technology Office online. If anyone has any questions that they want to direct to the internal Crane team about cyber opportunities, please do put that in the chat as well. And again, thank you all for being here. We really appreciate all the support. Back to you, Julie.
Thank you, Anne. Always appreciate it. You always do such a terrific job. I know we typically wait until the end to answer questions, but there was one that came up from someone I know that said, hey, here's an idea. Can we invite ONR Code 31 Director and potentially Dr. Benarwi, sorry, I'm obviously not, I haven't had enough coffee today, who's doing some amazing work in expeditionary cyber to help bridge S&T portfolio to NSWC Crane. So Anne, do you want to answer that question quickly before we get to Bernice?
Sure. So I don't know Dr. Barwani, I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Barnawi.
Barnawi.
I got it right this time.
Nice, okay. Yeah, phonics was never my thing. Yeah, so I would be more than happy to do that. So some cool news, NavalX actually now is part of ONR. So that was kind of a new thing, I think, since the last time we've done a small business event. And so I feel like we have a direct line to ONR. So I will take the action to speak with the NavalX Tech Bridge Director and see if she can't help us make that connection and hopefully get Dr. Barnawi participating in one of our future small business events.
Great, thanks, Anne, and thanks for the question. Keep those questions coming as well as the ideas. In the meantime, I have the pleasure of introducing Bernice Mathis. I wish I could tell you I was smart enough to invite her and found her myself. I did not. She actually found her way to us and has been apparently following our events for quite a while. So Bernice, we are absolutely delighted that you reached out. So happy that you could spend some time with us today. Her title is Business Opportunity Specialist for the U.S. Small Business Administration, and she runs the Indiana District Office. So Bernice, welcome, and you have the floor, ma'am. Bernice, I think you might be on mute.
Sorry about that.
Oh, hey, it happens to the best of us. Thank you. Take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bernice Mathis. I'm a business opportunity specialist with the SBA office located here in Indiana. Can we go to the next slide, please? Today, we're going to talk about how to win federal contracts to do business with the federal government. So we're going to talk briefly about that, and we can I go to the next slide, please? We're going to cover these objects here, government contract and severability, how to buy government goods and service, marketing your business and ideas to the federal government opportunities, and how the government can help you. So these are the 4 key objectives that we're going to talk about today, and hopefully you will gain some information from this. Next slide, please. In order to do business with the federal government, these are the first most important 3 keys factor that you must do. 1, you must obtain a DUNS number. Here's the phone number, and there's a link there that you can go and request for that. You must be registered to SAMs in order to do business with the federal government. That's something that a lot of small business owners wasn't aware of that. So in order to do business with the federal government, you must be registered in SAMs. Next slide, please. Government contracts suitability. Next slide, please. You can hit it. You can do it again, Derek. Okay. When you're doing business with the federal government, as you know, that the federal government is one of the largest buyer, which buy a lot of goods and services from small business opportunities, from small business owners. So every year we do about $132 billion a year, and 23% of that is dollars for the intent for the small businesses. So if you're a small business, it's best for you to register yourself in SAMs. So therefore, there is 3 types of set-asides for small business owners. You have full and open competition. You have small business set-aside, and you have number 3, sole source. Next slide, please. You really want to know if your business is ready to do business with the federal government. You need to know who buy what is your goods that you are selling. Then you need to know how to market yourself as far as having the cash and everything as far as the working capital. And then you have to be able to fulfill that government contract. And then you need to know where to find the opportunities. Next slide, please. Dirk, you can just hit the button a couple of times. Okay. These are some information that you need to find out if you're a small business. First, you need to identify your size standard. You need to know your business type and your location. You have to know your size restriction to be classified as a small business. Your business must be located and primarily in the United States. And if you're a nonprofit business, you cannot be considered as being a small business because you're doing business outside the United States. Next slide, please, Dirk. Do you know your NAICS code and size standard for your industry? Every business have a NAICS code, so that is your 6-digit NAICS code when you're doing business with the federal government. Then once you find out your NAICS code, then you have to find out your size standard and knowing what procurement agency who's going to buy your goods. And also I provide you with a website where you're going to find out about your NAICS code on your business. Next slide, please. You can hit it about 3 times. One more. There you go. All federal government have goals that they have to meet. So the federal government goes calendar basis from October the 1st to September the 29th, September the 30th. So right now you can find out that the small business goals is 5% for woman-owned. You have 5% for 8A certification in small disadvantaged business. You have a hub zone business goal, which is 3%. And that 3% is kind of hard for our federal agencies to reach sometimes. And then we have the service disabled veteran goal, which is 3%. Also, you have the set aside reserve for small business between $350 to $3,500, which is a micro purchase threshold. Because with those type of loans, if you have a credit card, they'll be able to work with you. Next slide, please. Marketing your business and identify federal opportunities. Next slide. I used to tell everyone, if you want to do business with the federal government, you need to have like a good capability statement, because your capability statement is what's going to sell your ideal to those procurement agencies or contract officers or KOs who wants to do business with you. So right here, this is most important parts that you need to have on your capability statement in order to do business with the federal government. This is just an ideal that you should have on your capability statement. Everybody's capability statement will be different, but the key fact is just to have this most important part of your capability statement. Next slide, please. You can hit it again, Derek. Research your market. I always tell everybody, make sure you know what agency is going to buy your goods and service. You need to find your niche. Find exactly what you can sell and how you can sell it. Understand the government spending and knowing they're competitive in their contracts that they have. Next slide, please. Anyone who wants to do business with the federal government, as of October of last year, they came off a new website called beta.sams.gov. It used to be FBO, it used to be Fabulous Ops, but now this is a new website. This is where you go to find any type of opportunities with the federal government. You can go down there, you can find out the opportunities, you can find out the history of a contract. You can look for jobs in the locations, what you want to do. So remember, this is the new website if you want to do business with the federal government. Next slide, please. As I stated before, the government fiscal year is from October to September. So when October 1st rolls in until December, that's like the first quarter. This is where we find out when we have our budget. Sometimes we might not have a budget until like the second or third quarter. So by the time the second or third quarter, we might have a full budget. So now when the fourth quarter rolls in July, this is when all the procurement agencies and contract officers is ready to spend that money. So when I mean ready to spend that money, they are really out there trying to find small business owners who can provide them with the service that the agency is requesting for. So just keep in mind the quarters, how the federal government works and how you can reach out to them, try to provide your service that you have to offer for them. Next slide, please. How can the government help you? SBA have a lot of resource partners who you can reach out to as far as helping you with these opportunities. Next slide, please. We have our Procurement Assistance. As you see, we have SBA resource partners. We have our BOS, which is Business Opportunity Specialist, that's located throughout the state, out every SBA office. You have a Procurement Center representative, which is located by regions. And also you have PTAC, which I know they're on the line today. And this is how they can help you in these different areas. And we have our marketing resources. So when you're out there wanting to do business with the federal government, the key point is basically the market research. First, you need to go to beta.sams. Then you can look at the federal procurement data system. That's where you can find out who had the contract before you did, or there's an opportunity when that's going to open up, how much money that contract was worth. So those where you can find out all the information on as far as what type of contracts. Remember, the System for Award Management, that's where you must register in order to do business with the federal government, because if you're not registered there, the federal government will not do no business with you. The NAVSEA Small Business Search System, that's when the procurement agency will look at that too, to find small business owners to do opportunities for beneath the threshold. And you have the subcontracting network system. This is where you can find maybe a joint partner who might want to do something with your teaming arrangements. And then we have the other resource, which is SBA spending, in which there, again, you can find out how much money was spent on contracts from different procurement agencies, and you can find out their forecast for the next fiscal year. So these are good websites where you can go at. And then also for last, you have GSA, Subcontracting Director, so you can find out when they're going to open up the doors for the next GSA starts, 3 or 4. And then you have the DoD Prime Contracting Director, so you can find if you want to do business with them or not. Next slide, please. To stay in touch with SBA, I have provided you with some information. And by us being the federal government, everything we do is free of charge. We have a lot of resources that you can just, text the SBA to find out the latest and update and the greatest training or resources that we have, events that we're going on nationwide. This is our contact information. Next slide, please. Again, my name is Vernice Mathis. I'm a business opportunity specialist with the SBA Indiana District Office. Right now, here's my phone number and my email address. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everybody for taking the time out their busy schedule to listen to the presentation on how to do business with the federal government. Thank you so much.
Bernice, thank you so much. That was really helpful. Are you, just out of curiosity, are you open for business at your office? Are you, given so many people are working out of their homes, including me, just curious if you're open or if the best way to reach you is always through email and phone.
For right now, our office is currently closed, so we are teleworking. So we do have, we do take emails and we do take phone calls until we know when to go back into the office.
Well, I bet you're hoping it's soon, and we do too. But thank you so much for joining us. I learned a lot today, and I think it's really amazing how many resources are available to small businesses, and the most sophisticated of them, I bet, learned something today too. So thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to having you again.
Thank you so much.
You are most welcome. And next we have Mike Fritsch. We're excited to hear from you, Mike. I love your title, Senior Entrepreneur in Residence and the Director of Revenue Development for the Northeast Indiana Innovation Center. So Mike, please, the floor is yours, sir.
Well, thank you, Julie. And Vernice mentioned resource partners. We are one of those resource partners for the SBA. So just real quick, the NIC, which stands for Northeast Indiana Innovation Center, is an ESO. And for those of you who are not into acronyms, stands for Entrepreneurial Support Organization. So we're a business incubator up here in Fort Wayne, and we do have 5 federal contracts right now, of which 4 of them are through the SBA to support organizations and entrepreneurs and startups and small businesses in various ways. One of them is a women's business center. One of them is for low-income small business owners. One of them is for COVID support of women's businesses across the state. One of them is with the EDA. And the last one, which is the reason why I'm talking about SBIR STTR, is something we call the FAST program. And go to the next slide. It's the Federal and State Technology Partnership Program, and we're currently this year the FAST awardee for Indiana. And what FAST is a cooperative agreement with the SBA to help companies and universities and people write and win more SBIR STTR programs. So we go through the state to help people do that. Let's go to the next slide. So first of all, what is SBIR STTR? I realized after I submitted this that I never put down what it really stands for on here, because sometimes you use the words, too many times. The acronyms that you never put it out there, but it's Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer Program. And these 2 programs are set aside, as it says, for extramural research for different agencies of the federal government, which means other companies and specifically small businesses and universities doing research, which then can be used for the federal government and for the small businesses. I'll let you read the rest of that, but let's go to the next slide. So, and who can submit? Basically, small businesses, 500 or fewer employees. You got to be for-profit, located primarily in the U.S., or 50% owned by U.S. owners. And basically, there's other rules if you're partly venture capital owned or with other investors. But the thing to know is that each agency of the federal government that is running an SBIR, STTR program can have different rules. So you need to check with each of those. So on the next slide, I talk about some differences between SBIR and STTR. If I had to just tell you what it is SBIR, the small business, is coming up with some ideas that's in line with what an agency wants, and they write a proposal about it. In the STTR, you have to have a nonprofit research partner, meaning typically a university, and that partner will be a small, well, minimum 30% part of the work. Now, in both cases, a university or research partner can be a partner. It's just that in STTR, it's required. And again, a lot of the agencies have different rules for different things. There are only 5 of the agencies, of which DoD is one of them, that have STTR as part of their offering. But in each case, as it says at the bottom, the small business is always the applicant and awardee. So in no cases does the university actually apply for SBIR or STTR grants. Okay, next slide. So this is, and again, this is kind of an overview. There's a lot of information about all the details and how to win them, how to do it. But, you know, first of all, why would you want to do it? I put 3 things over on the right-hand side, which is, first one, non-dilutive dollars. So there's a lot of ways. It is the largest source of R&D dollars from a non-dilutive standpoint in the United States. And non-dilutive means if you're getting money from an investor, you know, they typically get a piece of your company. Well, the government doesn't get a piece of your company. You own the IP, which is very important, and you maintain control. And so it's also really meant to be risky. It's meant to support and fund risky innovation. And specifically, that's what the government is looking for in most cases. So they know you're going to fail, and sometimes, you know, but they still fund things that have a good potential of making a big difference. And let's say, before I go on, one other thing in the state of Indiana is that the state of Indiana also matches phase 1 SBIR grants up to 50%. So, you know, if you win a grant, they'll put in half again as much money that you get to keep, again, with no strings attached. And you can win up to 3 of them. So on the next slide, I show the different agencies that are participating. And the reason I'm showing all these and not just talking about DoD here is because many times, and I'll explain why later, but many times there might be a reason why, even if you primarily do business with the DoD, that you may want to submit an application to NSF or another agency, and maybe they will fund you where DoD want, but you can take that IP and then possibly apply it as part of a DoD contract. So the 12th agency, which is the one at the top, is the SBA, which basically administers the program for all of these agencies. On the next slide, I just want to give you an idea of how many dollars are allocated. And as you can see, DoD by far is the biggest one with $1.75 billion, which is a lot, and it really makes a big difference in how some of this innovative work gets done. And the next one, which is the second biggest one, these are the two biggies: Department of Health and Human Services, a little over $1 billion, and you know, a lot of that's National Institute of Health and some of their other agencies. So next slide, please. So there's the different agencies have different types of things. Some of them are granting agencies, so they simply you write a proposal, they give you money to do it. Contracting agencies, which is the DoD is a contracting agency, they have a problem to solve, and they say we're accepting proposals from somebody who can come up with innovative ways to solve it. So basically, they will write you a contract, and you have deliverables underneath that, as opposed to a grant where you're kind of telling the government, here's what we're going to do and what we're going to come up with. The contracting agency says, here's my problem and here's what I want you to do. Who can do it? Some agencies have both. Some have one. Some have the other. And again, you'll have to find out in the DoD side exactly, you know, what they do. In a little more detail, and I'll just go through this pretty quickly on the next slide. But the grants and contracts, again, you can see here, most of them are on the contract side. You have pretty strict rules, just like getting a contract with the federal government for other things. So let's move on to, I talked about a phase, like a phase one. Well, there's 3 phases in an SBIR contract. Phase one, which is basically you've got an idea, maybe you've done some research, maybe you've done something on it. You're just really focused on the feasibility, and you know, they'll give you up to $252K, and it's different again in every agencies, and maybe 6 to 9 months to actually take your idea and see if it's feasible. When you get through a phase one, you can write a phase 2 proposal, and phase 2 proposals are more the prototype stage typically, and up to $1 million, $1.5 million, and it could be up to a 2-year project. So it's a significant amount of money, and again, it's you don't have to give up anything for it. You keep the IP, you keep your company. Phase 3 is involves no money from the government, but sometimes the DoD might give you a contract for what you've created outside of the SBIR program. But it's basically the commercialization of what you've done. And commercialization is very important in this because that's what they want to see. They want you to also make money on it. Next slide. And in Indiana, we're about in the middle of all the states. We rank 26 as far as SBIR awards. A lot of the universities are involved in SBIR, STTR proposals, so that's where a lot of them come from. But there are also more individuals and companies getting involved as we speak. Next slide. So what do you really have to have? First of all, you do have to have an innovation, which means, you know, they're not looking for an engineering project. Like, we're going to write some software that does this and this and this. They're looking for something that really is not incremental. It's revolutionary. It's new, hasn't been done before, and is a hard problem. It's got to have commercial potential. You have to write a commercialization plan as part of your proposal. And if you don't do a good job at that, they're not going to fund it. You have to be able to fit in these 3 phases of development. And sometimes there's a little space in between the timeline, because phase 1 and phase 2, you have to write a phase 2 proposal. And of course, you have to have a good team, good principal investigator and partners and a company and all of these things. Next slide. And of course, Vernice already talked about a little bit about what's required to do business with the government, and that's basically what you have to do here. You know, register with SAM, get a company, and sign up for all of those things. Next slide. So just so you know, it does take a while to get these things done. The registration can take 4 to 6 weeks. You know, you can, of course, NIH proposals typically take a lot longer, but some of these things can take 6 weeks or more. The timelines are all different between the different agencies also. Some of them have multiple application periods throughout the year. Some of them just have one. So check on all of the applications. And it also helps, as with any government contract, to talk to them first and know what the government wants, and they know you. But you should be able to know, you know, 3 to 6 months, and then they'll do the negotiations, and it can take up to 6 months to get money in the bank. So next slide, and which is the final one, and I just would like to also encourage people, you know, if you want more information, to contact the NIC at the website down there, and we will be happy to help you with the next step. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mike. This was really helpful. I wasn't aware of the FAST program, and always learn a lot about SBIR and STTR every time I hear it. So I don't know if I'm thick-skulled, probably, but you know, still it bears repeating. I think it's an incredible opportunity and program for people to participate in. So thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
Next we have Shadi Azum. If we were together, he would get the award for traveling the farthest distance. He comes to us from the terrible place of San Diego, California. Shadi, so glad you could join us. He has some interesting titles too. I got to read them because I'd never remember them all. He is the, let me think about this. He's NAVWAR Small Business Innovation Research PM, NAVWAR Rapid Innovation Fund PM, and then he's the NavalX SBIR STTR Liaison Officer. So Shadi, you clearly don't have any time to do anything else but work. So really grateful you could spend some time with us this afternoon to talk about what you're doing. So please.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. And yeah, I think the next slide actually will say a little bit about me. I did intentionally keep that picture, which is 30 pounds more on me, to realize that I'm not working out during quarantine. So it's probably a good thing I keep that up there to remind myself I still got it. But yes, as Julie mentioned, I actually am on the government side to award SBIR contracts. So I'm probably, if you ever do business with NAVWAR, which I'll kind of talk about a little bit later, I'm the actual program manager that oversees the entire portfolio and the funding. So there's a good chance you might hear from me if you are doing business with NAVWAR in the SBIR, SCTR realm. I also help the NavalX community. I'm serving right now as a liaison to NavalX and the Navy SBIR community, which is managed at the Office of Naval Research, or ONR. So I do have those two different hats on there. And just a little disclaimer, I know Mike actually went over previously about SBIR, SCTR. You're going to see a little bit of repeated content. The one thing I will say is that I'm speaking of it from the government side and very Navy focused. So as I was kind of listening to Mike's presentation, you will probably see repeated content, but do think it's still very narrowly scoped to the Navy SBIR realm. Next slide, please. Okay, so I actually don't have to go through this. Thank you, Mike, for covering this, but this is a simple drill down of what SBIR and SCTR are. There are two programs that have been stood up since 1983. And the best way I can explain about them is that they are basically programs that provide seed funding to small businesses to help grow your business, but then also help address government needs. We at the Navy leverage SBIR SCTR very, very much. It's a great program for us to hit some of our mid and long-term gaps using some early research and development. Mike did talk about commercialization. That's also a very important part. Every single one of our SBIR SCTR projects that we shoot out across the Navy do have a dual purpose application to it. A great example is that if we are very much interested in cryptography, of course, cryptography is something that helps with our data and sort of confidentiality in the government, but it also helps apply it to healthcare records or even the banking industry. So do note that every one of the Navy SBIRs or SCTRs that we push out for you guys to bid on proposals, they will have some sort of dual application associated with it, so it could help grow your business, not just in the government realm. There are competitive programs. Mike just went over those, so I'll just go to the next slide. Thank you. This is actually a very similar slide to what Mike presented, which shows the eligibility criteria. I'll talk about broad agency announcements a little bit later, but it's a document that we use to post our topics for you guys to bid on. But in there, we'll have a section, I believe it's section 4, if I have done my job well, but in every one of these broad agency announcements to have these eligibility criteria in detail for you to understand whether or not you qualify to apply. Next slide, please. This shows kind of just the win-win situation of why in the government we do like SBIR, SCTR, and what it benefits on the small business side. On the government side, I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier. SBIR and STTR are great programs for us to kind of hit our mid and long-term gaps. It helps foster that innovation so we can think ahead. And then one other thing that I don't think I've heard previously, but I'll bring this up in my slide deck, is that any one of our follow-on awards in SBIR, SCTR are sole source or non-competitive. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but basically that means that once you've applied to SBIR, SCTR, we can always adopt and continue the work through a sole source contract. You've already been through the competitive process when you've initially submitted your proposal, so any awards after that become sole source. The one thing on the small business side that I would kind of harp on is that we've actually seen some great success stories with SBIR, SCTR. If you've heard of Qualcomm, 23andMe, and Illumina, those are some great large businesses that are doing so well and actually got their start through SBIR, SCTR. So I'd like to use that as an inspiration for startups and small businesses to engage in this program, because you might be one of those that eventually go in there in a couple of years. Next slide, please. Mike did cover this in a very nice logo format. This basically just shows you all of the different agencies across the government that participate in SBIR. I've indicated which ones participate in STTR, and those are shown on the bottom right, a little seafoam green, if I made it. I'm doing interior design in my house, so all these new things are coming to light. But the circular image that you see, or icon at the bottom right, shows which ones also engage in STTRs. And just as a reminder, STTR is basically the same thing as SBIR, but just the partnership agreement is required that a small business partner up with a research institution. Next slide, please. Oh, I did not know I had transitions when I thought about this until now. Maybe a couple of slides to kind of advance through that. Thank you. Actually, I think this is just it. But this basically shows who in the Navy participates in SBIR, SCTR, and that's shown here. NAVWAR, where I come from, is the Naval Information Warfare Systems Command, which is in the middle. And then you did kind of see early on with Anne's presentation that she represents NAVSEA. NAVSEA is also represented here. They have a pretty substantial SBIR, SCTR budget. So doing work with them is definitely beneficial given their budget. But this shows all of the individual agencies under the Navy that participate in SBIR, SCTR. If you ever want to get a hold of program managers like myself or the absolute representatives, there is a hyperlink that I've included here that kind of links you to where those can be found. But if you're kind of lost in that, feel free to reach out to me personally, and I'm happy to connect you with a different commander agency. Next slide, please. This just shows how SBIR CTRs are funded. Even internally in the government, a lot of our very senior leadership get a misconception of what that, where the money comes from. It's not, it is a set aside program, yes, and it is congressionally mandated. However, I like to think of it, and the best way to express it is that it's a savings account on our own funding. So on the previous slide, we kind of mentioned each of the different commands. Think of each one of us having a slice of our funding, our own internal tax, about 3.2% of our R&D budget. And that's reserved specifically to help with funding SBIR CTR projects. So this is just a little fun fact that every one of our funding comes from our own internal research and development budget. So I like to think of it as simply a savings account. Next slide, please. This just shows you how we actually get started with SBIR CTR. It all comes from a start of topics. We want to express what our needs are, and we do that in the form of what we call topics. It's an explanation of what our problem is and where we envision to see the phase process to be should you get an award. And Mike did kind of cover that. You'll see that, I think, in the next couple of slides of what that three-phase process is, but that starts with us posting a topic. We do it 3 times a year. I have included a hyperlink, which is the second bullet here, of where you typically would find our topics located. And honestly, it varies on how many topics are released, as well as how many awards we release per topic. It depends on a number of different things, namely comes down to what our priorities are in our own internal commands, as well as how much funding we actually have to support the awards. So those are shown here, and typically we release 3 times a year around April, August, and November. If you go to dodcibr.sctr.mil, which is that second hyperlink on this second bullet on here, you can actually subscribe to their sort of mailing service to kind of get a subscription or get alerts when we actually post topics. So I highly recommend that. I can actually direct someone personally if you want a little bit more information about it. Every time that we post a topic, it is open for basically 60 days. I'll talk about what that breakdown of that 60-day period is. But then once that sort of period concludes, we at the government have 90 days to tell everyone who has applied whether or not you are selected for award. And then following that, we have another 90-day period to actually make the awards from that. So let's go to the next slide, which I believe covers that 60-day period. Once our topics are released, it starts a process known as a pre-release period. It's a 30-day period where basically you as a company, you as a small business, if you are interested in learning a little bit more about the topic or would like more detail, we do have contact information for all of our topic authors on the topics, so you can intimately discuss the topic with them via phone or email. This is probably one of the best advice that I can give to anyone who's interested in SBIR ICTR, is to capitalize on this pre-release 30-day period, because it is the absolute best time for you to determine whether or not your skills, qualifications, products, research, or development really fits with the topic we're pushing out to you guys. Once the 30-day period concludes, you can still ask questions, but we post the questions publicly and the answers are posted publicly as well. And that's a 30-day period as well. That 30-day period that between open and close is actually the time where you as a small business can actually submit a proposal. Next slide, please. So I don't need really to discuss this slide. Mike already covered it. Thank you, Mike, again. The one thing I will kind of mention, every agency does something a little bit different in terms of funding and their schedule. The amounts that you see on here, as well as the schedule, are Navy-specific SBIR amounts and schedules. So I think the one thing I think Mike presented was a 150K phase 1. We actually have a 140K phase 1 amount. Nonetheless, the spirit or the nature of what each of these phases are no different than what Mike presented. Phase 1 typically is an ability for you as small businesses to showcase that your proposed solution to our topic can be feasible and meet the topic at hand. And then once we make those phase 1 awards, you have that sort of period to develop that what we call feasibility study. Those companies that do get a phase 1 award then are only eligible to compete for phase 2, which then gives a substantial amount of funding. Typically for the Navy, we typically release about 1 to 2 phase 2s based on the number of phase 1s that we receive. And then one thing I do want to mention, phase 3 is not exactly a specific contract type. We basically, it's a temporal thing in the process where usually phase 3 is any type of contract. If you are familiar with government contracts, there's different types of them. For phase 3, it's any particular type of contract, but it's not funded using SBI or ICTR. The phase 3 is probably your success or your light at the end of the tunnel. And it's an ability for us as the government to finally what we call transition the work that we've done in phase 1 and phase 2. So think of phase 1 and phase 2 as like seed funding, and phase 3 is your finish line funded by the actual program of record or the program in the government that originally pushed out the topic to begin with. Another thing to kind of keep in mind is that anytime in the process, we can make a phase 3. So we've seen companies that have already done a phase 1, but the government that pushed out the topic had enough funding that they went straight to phase 3. So you don't necessarily have to go through this process with that sort of time or schedule in order to kind of get to that success. Next slide, please. There are some other what I call injection points. You don't have to start as a small business directly from phase 1 applying to one of our topics. There are 2 other injection points that I do want to point out. So if we go to the next slide, the first one is called direct to phase 2. Some of our topics just vary on what we're looking for. Some of them are very, I would say, early research and development, where what we're looking for is something we're not expecting to see in about anytime soon, probably in the next 5 to 7 years. So it's best for us to kind of go through the phase 1, 2, and 3 process. But there are some cases where we want to immediately go to a phase 2, where we want to immediately have a prototype being straight up developed. Again, it really depends on the type of gap that we're addressing. But you'll see some of our topics are called or termed direct to phase 2. And I just want to make a mention that it's the same thing where you see a topic, but when you apply to it, you are applying to achieve a phase 2 award, not a phase 1. With that being said, there's an implication that as a small business, you've already done that phase 1 type of work before. So if you've already used some of your internal research and development dollars to develop something that we've already pushed out, this is a great opportunity, a great injection into the direct to phase 2 opportunity. Next slide, please. Okay, probably one of the most important injection points that probably accounts, at least for my command, about 40% of our portfolio is what we call reach back or a subsequent phase 2. Basically, what this means is anytime that you have been awarded a phase 1 or phase 2 SBA or SCTR award, anyone in the entire sort of government agency realm. So we kind of mentioned 11 of them in that sort of graphic, but any one of those agencies can take what you've already created and develop a phase 2 off of that, a phase 1 or phase 2 award. That's super beneficial because as kind of Anne mentioned, like we have different overlapping like focus areas. She mentioned like cybersecurity, and I was like, oh my God, like we have that also at NAVWAR with one of our program offices. So if, for example, you have a NAVSEA phase 1 or phase 2 that you've been awarded, we at NAVWAR can capitalize off of that phase 1 and phase 2 and create a phase 2 base off of it. So you don't have to necessarily go through that process of starting off with applying for a topic and then phase 1 and phase 2. If you've already have an existing SBIR portfolio, we can leverage that. So anytime I also reach out to or connect with small businesses, I typically will ask them what previous SBIR or CTR awards they have, because I could probably leverage that faster than I can pushing out a topic and going through that cycle all over again. Next slide, please. So Mike did highlight this. He mentioned about IP rights. This is just a very high-level summary of what data rights you as a small business would achieve or retain if you ever get an SBIR phase 1 or phase 2 award. Right now, if you've ever been awarded a SBIR or SCTR award, you do have a 20-year non-renewable period for which you actually hold rights to. Basically, what this means is we as the government can use, modify, I mentioned a whole bunch of different verbs in there. But basically, we can use your products. We just can't take the products and give it to a non-government entity. And that's the best way to summarize what data rights you hold. So it would protect you from actually giving it to a potential competitor. And that's another benefit I say with the small business incentive about using these programs is that you do have that 20-year non-renewable period. And when I say non-renewable, I mean the minute you actually get a phase award, starting from phase 1, it starts a 20-year clock. After the 20-year period, the government then has unlimited rights to use that. So there is a period where you do hold those rights, but other than that, outside of that, we as the government do get unlimited rights afterwards. Next slide, please. Okay, this is, I believe, my very last slide, which is some strategies that I always recommend to small businesses whenever they are wanting to apply for SBI or SCTR. The one thing that I always get asked is whether or not small businesses can recommend topics. What I say to that is because SBI or SCTR is a competitive program, it kind of violates the competitive nature if a small business was recommending a topic and then it ends up getting that the small business does get an award. So what we do say is that if you do have a product or technology that maybe we as the government do not know or not aware of, feel free to discuss that state-of-the-art technology with us. It could help inspire new topics for us to create, or maybe identify a gap that we don't know we have. So definitely, you're more than welcome to have discussions with us on inspiring or creating new topics. We just can't accept topics directly from you, nor give you any insight about what we're about to create. Next thing, and this is, I kind of mentioned this a little bit before, but if you've ever been awarded SBI or CTR, please feel free to let us know what those previous awards are, because we can always expand or adopt from that. The next thing is, it's always helpful to understand where your product or technology or anything that you're doing in SBI or CTR, where it's going. I always tell companies, if you are engaging or you get an award, by all means, have as many discussions as you would like with the government technical point of contact that's assigned to every one of your efforts. They are there to help transition your work after phase 1 or in phase 2. So it's really helpful for you to understand where it's going. For NAVWAR, we have a great resource. I've included a hyperlink here, but it gives I call it a Bible for everything that we do at NAVWAR, but it tells you every one of our programs. So if you're ever interested in what we do as a command, as well as if we have any topics that are pushed out from NAVWAR and you'd like a little bit more information about what that program is, because we do mention what that is in the topics, that's a great resource to use. The next bullet is just one of the many different resources that my previous speakers have actually totally mentioned before. It is just one of the portals that we ask that you be registered or do your homework ahead of time. SAM is just one of them. Vernice did talk about some of the other sites to kind of get things in order before you do apply. I think that's my very last slide. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you.
Shadi, thanks so much. You know, there is a penalty for doing a great job, and that is you've got to come back. So,
I appreciate that.
You'll be willing to do that, and we'll try to make them in the afternoon so you don't have to get up at dark 30.
Totally fine.
In or you can come to Indiana. We'd love to host you here. So
that's perfect.
Thank you so much for your participation this afternoon. Really appreciate it. It was a terrific bunch of information you were willing to share. So many, many thanks. Next, we have Andy Alexander.
Julie, you're freezing up. You might want to turn off your video.
Participated.
Yeah, you kind of sad.
Crane. And so at any rate, Andy, please take it away. We're anxious to hear from you.
Can you hear me, Julie?
Yes, sir, we can.
All right. Well, good afternoon from Brown County. We're broadcasting live. I see about 10 of the people that are online are businesses I work with as a counselor. So thanks for participating today. And I'm a resource partner like some of the other presenters. You want to go to the next slide for me, please? So if you look at that map right there, of all the counties throughout Indiana, there's 5 areas, there's 5 consulars. I cover the South Central area, which is about 26 counties. And the Northeast is our vacant position, which our State Director, Christine Jeffries, is looking at right now about filling. And Northwest is Diana Hunter and for Crown Point and Lafayette. And Nate Lofton is in Indianapolis, downtown. And down in Evansville is Jim Haddon. And we all serve as procurement specialists. On the left are some of the services that we provide. There's about 9 of them in there that stretch out among all the different ways to look at these governments. And just want to remind everybody, there's 5 types of governments. There's the federal, there's the states, all 50 states. Then you have all the counties throughout the nation. And then you have the cities, and then you have the towns. All of them are viable entities that are seeking vendors and companies. And the PTAC counselors, the 5 of us, work between the vendors and the government contracting offices. Next slide, please. So I work for a PTAC, the Procurement Technical Assistance Centers. They've been around about 35 years. They're under the Defense Logistics Agency's cooperative agreements. They do partial the funding, and then the other funding for our program is state employees. A lot of us are. Comes through Indiana's Economic Development Corporation. And you can see it through all the states, Samoa Islands, and Puerto Rico. There's probably 500 consulars worldwide with over 94 to 95 programs supporting all those areas for all the businesses. Next slide, please. So today I'm just going to focus on the federal government because a lot of the presenters today have focused on that. And they're the biggest spender. And there's some of the amounts out of 2019. And the 3 main areas that they're looking at to make sure that we meet as vendors is the innovativeness and competitiveness and reliability of our products and the total quality that we give back to the government, and we meet those standards. And there's different types of sale contracts with the federal government. I like to call them thresholds, the way they spend money, and it's 3 of them. The one on the bottom, below $10,000, is what's called a micro purchase. That's the credit card, and that's why a lot of businesses sign up and say, yes, we'll accept the credit card, and they can do up to $10,000. Between $10,000 and $100,000 is a specified acquisition. That's like a blanket purchase agreement, task orders, things like that. Above $100,000 with the federal government is a contract, and you've got to bid for it or submit proposals, and they evaluate them and they award them accordingly. So those are the 3 types. As a counselor, I bid a lot of businesses that just start up entrepreneurial to stay at threshold 1 their first year for micro purchases, and then work their way up through the 2nd threshold into the 3rd. Next slide, please. Okay. So this is just a reflection of how successful the Department of Defense has been with the 9 services. I'm talking Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, NOAA, Centers of Disease Control. They're all under the DOD. And this shows in their set-asides that Bernice Mathis from the SBA was talking about earlier. The SBA watches over these government agencies. There's over 1,200 of them and throughout the federal government. And they're all given goals within these set-aside standards. And with the one agency, the DOD, they pretty much done pretty good on their goals. For last year, though, they didn't meet their goal for women-owned small businesses or for their hub zones. And I've noticed just in my territory of South Central Indiana that I've had an increase in hub zone applications and people taking advantage of that. And I've had an increase in the women-owned businesses I work with, especially in the certifications in that. And one thing I want to do as a counselor is to increase that, get those viable vendors over to and certified and credentialed so that our federal government can take advantage of their products and services. Next slide. So the 7 steps to government contracting that we've come up with to spell out success is to start out with some type of government procurement action plan. Vernice mentioned with the SBA about a marketing plan. And when I meet with you as a counselor, I'll actually put you through an assessment of where you're at right now in the systems administratively, and how you're marketing yourself, and how the government's looking at you, where they can find you. And then in the contracting goal of winning a contract, implementing it, and getting paid. Those are the 3 phases that we help you with. The 7 steps here is going from getting registered all the way down to winning a contract. The next slide, please. So when organizing your government procurement action plan, the things I look at to make sure they're consistent and you're marketing yourself and branding properly so the governments can understand who you are and what you do, is on the federal side, it's to make sure that your SAM profile and your dynamic small business search profile, that's the SBA marketing site, and your capability statement and your website all agree and they're consistent, and you have a good message. I'll look at that as a counselor, produce an assessment, and we'll go over that. I did one this morning in Linton at a coffee shop with a company that has a product they want to sell to the federal government, to the military installations. And they're in the administrative phase still. As soon as I can get them to get those profiles and things to agreement, we'll move into the marketing and go after bid opportunities. So that's on the left there with the PTAC client registration. NACS codes are normally used at the federal level. Below federal level, a lot of states, depending if they're agricultural states or technology states or whatever, they may use commodity codes or their own set of codes, like the UNSP codes. And then they talked about obtaining a DUNS number through Dun & Bradstreet, registering with state governments for their different agencies. Here in Indiana, they're pretty organized. There's 3 basic registration systems, one for the universities, one for the Department of Administrative Services, and then the Department of Transportation has its own. With over 53 different state agencies, they have it centralized within 3. And we can help you find that out. I thought I saw a question there earlier from someone about what is the contact or SBIR for the Naval Warfare Center. That's an example as a counselor. If I'm asked that question and you're working with me, I'll find that out for you. And I'll get back with you and respond to that question for a local answer like that. Or anywhere in the country. It could be San Diego or down in Florida. And the capability statement is a 1-page marketing virtual document that tells government contracting officers what your core competencies are, your products and services, what's the differentiator, what's so different about your company and others, your company data, and your past performance. A lot of federal buying contracting people are trained through the Defense Acquisition University to those standards. And they love to get a capability statement, bring it in virtually, and then when they do have to do market research for a sources sought or pre-solicitation type of bid, they can go out on a dynamic small business search, they can get on the SAM system, or they love to have these capability statements. It can also be used to virtually market to government contracting officers that are putting out bids that may not match your NACS codes, but you want to market back to them to bring to their attention. We have 7 days left with the federal government till they end their fiscal year. There's a lot of them right now that are hustling, trying to close out their budgets to avoid de-obligating any money back to the U.S. Treasury because they developed a budget to go broke in 7 days. And you can assist them with this by getting out this capability statement to them. If you want to know more about that, you can contact me offline or one of my counterparts. I won't get into the registrations. There are minority set-asides by not just Indiana, throughout the country. That includes veterans and mental disabilities and handicap, by race, by Native American, service-disabled veterans with service-connected disabilities. But normally down at county level, town and city, you don't have as many of those set-asides programs because they don't have the staff or the funding to manage a lot of them. There are exceptions for Indianapolis, the city there. They do have a diversity program that works pretty good. Also in proposal preparation, if your administration is squared away and you've been marketing and you look at a bid opportunity and you want to go after a proposal, an example with me, if you'll tell me what that bid is, I'll look at it with you and go over a timeline and an outline on one piece of paper to figure out should we even bid for it. And then if you decide you're going to go after it, I can't write the proposal for you as a counselor, but I can review it before you submit it in. So if I get it like a week before, I can look over it, see if your fully burdened rate, your other direct costs, your salary and fringe, your profits, all in line in your spreadsheet, your technical approach, all the different things that the federal contracting officer would have put in the statement of work, or the request for proposal, or the request for a quote. And there's also invitations for bids, which is usually construction. Now the workshop and seminars, those are things like today. I'm doing a series of them on doing business with the government throughout my territory through chambers of commerce. I'll also work and do seminars and workshops with the Indiana Economic Development Offices, the Small Business Development Centers, and the Chamber of Commerce's as well. Bernice was asked by Julie earlier about was she able to get out right now. In the federal government, majority of the offices have people working out of their homes and things like that. In the last 4 weeks, I've visited with 40 businesses on site somewhere on their property site or in their communities through partnerships with the SBDCs, to the chambers, local library, it could be a coffee shop, whatever, and still at the same time adhering to the precautions for the COVID-19. And to make sure we're doing what we can to assist these businesses in Indiana, go after these different opportunities in these 5 governments. The next slide. When looking for bid opportunities, if you did something very simple, like just put bids, Nashville, Indiana, they're going to have them posted on their website. If they don't, down at town level, they'll probably write it on the board at the town hall, or they'll put it in that example, the Brown County paper. As you work up through the governments, they get more sophisticated. The federal level, they used to have it on the FBO, Federal Business Opportunity. But in the last couple of months, they've transitioned that over to beta SAM.gov, and they're trying to centralize all the different acquisition systems onto one system. But you can still find them on that. Here in Indiana, we provide a bid matching service that's free for Indiana businesses that takes your keywords, your NACS codes, your product service codes, in the regions for which you're looking for bid opportunities. It could be worldwide, or it could just be the state of Indiana or the neighboring states. And it puts an email into your mailbox every morning of those bid opportunities that it's captured according to those search criteria that we've developed for each business. And then you can share that with myself, for an example. As a counselor, I can look at the bid opportunity, and like I said earlier, I can tell you whether it's a go or a no-go, or if it's a viable opportunity for you. Or if it's a viable opportunity, then we'll go down the route of doing a proposal. So that's a great system to take advantage of. Next slide, please. So when you do submit a bid, they range from what I call whales. That's a basic year contract with a couple option years. That's usually an RFP. Projects are RFQs, requests for quotes. Right now, we're getting a lot of RFQs because the federal government's getting close to the end of its fiscal year, and it's trying to obligate its funding out. So they're putting out a lot of combined solicitations and RFQs. But when you do get one, my counsel always is read the solicitation. Take your notes, then read it again, because you're going to miss something. Share it with someone like myself as a second set of eyes, see what I come up with my notes. And then we draft up a proposal timeline and outline and make a decision. Should we bid on it, or should we pass on it? And you got to follow the directions in it. Don't be creating things that are not required in it, or adding things, or use the wrong font, or don't submit it on time. And I just had an individual couldn't get in Camp Atterbury because he didn't check out the security requirements to make it to the contracting office. So he missed, he was late putting it in by a half hour, and he was disqualified. So my advice always is turn in a proposal a day before it's due, and then check to make sure they receive it. and then maybe they'll give you an opportunity to get that other document in or submit something else properly. Next slide. So performing on the contract, remember I said there's 3 phases: administrative, marketing, and contracting. And that's where, as a consular, that's my big reward, is to get you over to contracting, have a contract awarded to you, invoicing, the administration of it. But even when you get that contract, you can share it with me, and I'll take a look at it as well. I'll take notes. We'll read the contract again, make sure that it matches your proposal, and that proposal and that contract match the statement of work. Because sometimes things get changed over a period of time between the government and the vendor. It's always good to use a PTAC counselor as a third set of eyes between the contracting officer, yourself, and the buyer. Kind of like purchasing a home with all the seller and the buyer and that, and the realtor being in the middle. But you want to get on the same page with the government, and you want to communicate with that contract team. And that team is yourself, your business, your sales, marketing, and contracting office, your CFO, CEO, or just yourself if it's just a one-person small business. And the other part of that team is myself, and then the contracting, who you're giving a deliverable to. Because it's not just about this contract you won, it's about, can that contract be modified? Can it be expanded? Can there be additional work? Because you're showing best business practices and you're establishing past performance while you're doing this. So you want to take advantage of all this when you're performing the contract. Next slide. So in conclusion, I got 8 steps here that I'd like to share with you, and that is, keep your registrations, credentials, and certifications current and accurate. If you're not sure if they are, you can come to a counselor like me. I'll do a procurement action plan with you. I'll review it as though I'm, in this example, the federal government, that all your different profiles, capability statement, website are all consistent. You're branding and marketing yourself properly. And you need to market yourself out there. You just can't wait for a bid to come your way. That's done with bid match and FBO and the different ways the government's put out bids, but you can market back to the government. You can give them unsolicited proposals. You can generate white papers. You can go to their industry days. You can get on their webinars and communicate with them. So it's a two-way, and that's part of your marketing. And then when you read the solicitation, make sure you highlight those key points and then read it again. Subcontracting is a great way. I think in a lot of times in these large businesses, they're really, by federal standards, under the Federal Acquisition Regulation, they're called other than small. So that's interesting. But large corporations have SBLOs, Small Business Liaison Officers. Their jobs are to go out and find small businesses and encourage them to be part of their small business subcontracting plan that is required by the federal government through the SBA to be a part of that team with that large business. So that'd be with a company, a large company that's won a contract already. It's just a matter of you teaming up with them. There's a website called Subnet, administered by the SBA. There's others that you can look at for those teaming opportunities. And of course, you can use someone like myself to do some of that matching. A great website to look at what's going on around you in your community worldwide is USA Spending, that's one word, .gov. You can put in a NAICS code or a zip code and see what's going on, all the way down to grants, PPP, loans, contracts that are happening around you. You can do it by NAICS code to find out what your competition's doing. If you need assistance in something like that, and of course you can work with someone like me, or Nate or Jim or Diana. Whenever you do submit a proposal and you wonder, wow, I wonder when they're going to make a decision on this. Well, you can go back to them. I'd say within 10 days of submitting a proposal, I would ask them, have you made an award on this? And then if they, let's say they did, and they do announce it on FBO as an award to another company, well, there's an opportunity for you to contact that other company and say, you know, I'd love to team with you. There were like 40 requirements on that statement of work or performance work statement. And I'm really good at number 15, 18, and 25, and I'd love to team with you on that, because I don't know if you have all your employees right now or you have all your materials, but I do, and I'd love to team with you. And that'd be a way to be involved in a part of a contract that maybe you felt you lost, and now it's another opportunity. You want the governments, mainly the federal government is very good at this, of giving written debriefs. They'll debrief you in writing because they're required by the FAR to give you a written debrief of how you ranked, how they evaluated you, and you can learn from that for the next time you're going to do it. And then you can see how other people ranked and how their costing went to figure out your fully burdened rates in the future. You want to learn from those experiences. There's without competition, there's no market. Always remember that. You want to be teamed with, you want to align yourself with, and collaborate with all other companies that are out there, because there's that teaming opportunity, or with them down the road when one comes out that's for some type of set aside that you're not qualified for, where you could be a subcontractor with that other company. And of course, there's PTAC and other free assistances available that were listed earlier by Vernice with the SBA on the resource partners. The next slide. So Indiana's a state that works. I work with the Department of Defense portion of the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. We're available for you. Our costs are free, but you have to align and apply for the program, take advantage of it. Next slide, please, is my contact information. If you're interested in needing some of this help, just contact me at my email there, or you can Google Andy Alexander, Indiana. I'll come up and I'll refer you to my counterparts, depending on where you're at in the state. And I'm looking over at the questions right now, and I don't see any questions from anybody. So at this time, I'll turn my presentation back over to you, Julie, and thank you very much for allowing PTAC to participate in your event today.
Oh gosh, thank you, Andy. You guys are a mainstay on these things. And if memory serves, you're new to Indiana, although you've been doing this for a while. You clearly got your hands full and are leading the charge in Southwest Central Indiana, and are such a great asset to small businesses there. So thank you for coming to Indiana. We always welcome new Hoosiers, and really appreciate your time today. And I'm sure, so stick around though. We'll have other questions probably at the end. So
absolutely.
Again, I'd like to encourage people to write their questions in the chat, and we'll get to them. But again, thanks, Andy. And next we have Matt Burkett, who has also participated in a number of these small business events over the last few months. And Matt, we're so delighted you're back with us again today. But Matt serves as Director of Small Business for Crane. So Matt, please.
Yeah, no, thank you, Julie. Thanks to you, Midwest Tech Bridge, for setting this up. Like Julie said, I'm Matt Burkett. I'm the Deputy for Small Business at NSWC Crane. Got a slide presentation to go through. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to provide much that hasn't already been talked about, but we'll do our best here. So next slide, please. So what do I do as the Deputy for Small Business, and what is my role, or what is the Small Business Office's role within the command? Is so my primary objective is to identify and advocate for the use of small business in both prime contracting opportunities and subcontracting opportunities. Primarily looking for those prime contracting opportunities, always trying to set acquisitions aside for small business. And as you guys have seen throughout the day, the various socioeconomic categories that we have, and sort of what DoD is graded on. But that's the main objective, is to try to find those prime opportunities. If we can't find those opportunities, then we look to those larger efforts to try to find those subcontracting opportunities, or those small business participation ideas that we can put in or carve out in our contracting opportunities. I review any procurement action that we have at Crane that exceeds $10,000. As Andy mentioned, $10,000 and below, those are the credit card purchases. I have no oversight over those actions, but anything over $10,000 requires what's called a DD 2579 to be sent to me for review. And during that review process, that's where we really try to, iron out the acquisition strategy, whether it be a small business set aside. If so, are we going to set aside for a socioeconomic category? If it's not set aside, then we decide to go the full and open competition route. In order to set something aside, we need 2 or more responsible small businesses that can provide the good or service. So always looking for small business competition in order to have the opportunity to set something aside. And really, my primary role my primary function is I work closely between contracting and the requirements personnel. So in my former life, I've been at Crane about 15 years. For 11 and a half, 12 years, I was a contracting officer. So I know that side of the business really well. So I work closely with, like I said, with contracting, with the requirements personnel to kind of shape those requirements and see where small business can support us. Next slide, please. Real quick, how do we engage? Once an opportunity has been, once we have an opportunity, once we worked with contracting and the requirements personnel, what are some ways that we're going to perform some market research functions with industry to figure out what capabilities are out there currently, and see if we can set aside for small business. So if it's a service contract, 99 times out of 100, we're going to issue a source of SOT or an advance notice, because there's the barrier to entry in the service world is fairly low. So there's always new businesses coming on board. So typically we're going to issue a source of SOT notice, whether that be, whether that be via seaport, as we'll talk about a little bit later. Sometimes, depending on the type of service, we might issue it on beta SAM, but typically we're going to issue a source of SOT announcement to allow industry to provide capability statements and information to us as far as what their what their skills and abilities are. Pre-solicitation conferences, something that we do, especially for new actions. Obviously COVID has kind of made things difficult for us as far as that goes, but that's a tool that we have in the toolbox. Draft statements of work. We like to issue those oftentimes along with the RFIs just to get industry feedback. I mean, you guys are the experts. You are the folks that will be performing the work for us. So we want to make sure that things are written in such a way that you understand and provide us any feedback that might make the procurement a little bit better, to where when that RFP, that request for proposal, is issued, a lot of those kinks have been worked out if there are any. And then lastly, we do, especially on those $250,000 and below opportunities, what we would consider simplified acquisition. We utilize DSBS heavily for that market research. So I have that on there as to say that, having a complete DSBS profile is important because we do utilize that. So next slide, please. So this chart here, this pie chart, just to give you an idea of kind of the way the spending is broken out. This is an FY19. Obviously, as Andy mentioned, the end of the government FY is coming up on 30 September. So we'll have, we'll have a new pie in a few weeks. But from FY19, we obligated about $1.6 billion, and you can kind of see the way it was divided up as far as services and supplies. Kind of the way things have trended so far in FY20, I expect that service part of the pie to continue to grow. That just seems to be the way, especially at the Warfare Center level where we are. That seems to be the way things are trending. Now at Crane, we still buy a lot of supply. We still buy a lot of product, but that service portion of it is continuing to grow. So, if you're a service provider, there's going to continue to be opportunities for you. So continue to take a look at that portfolio. So next slide, please. Excuse me. So here's a snapshot of our top NAICS codes. If you're a service provider, like we mentioned, down at the bottom, you can see the Seaport E, Seaport Next Gen NAICS code that we use. Everything that we issue under Seaport Next Gen is going to be issued under the NAICS code 541330. Every NAICS code, especially, if your small business is new to the government, every NAICS code that the government uses, the government will assign a NAICS code to every procurement. Every NAICS code has a small business size standard associated with that. So for services, it's typically going to be a what they call an annual receipt number. So for 541330, the small business size standard is $41.5 million, meaning if your company makes less than $41.5 million, then chances are you're going to be a small business. If we're buying supply type items, as you can see on the top of this, it's going to be a number of employees, like 500. 500 is probably the most prevalent small business size standard, but they range anywhere from about 250 employees all the way up to 1,500 employees. So depending on the NAICS code, you may or may not be a small business. So next slide, please. So this slide here, just the next couple of slides, just kind of talking about what we buy at Crane. So we buy a lot of services. We do buy some R&D, as you could see from the pie chart a couple slides ago. We buy test equipment. We buy business and financial management services. We buy computers. We buy, furniture. Anything you can think of, we buy. So we buy them various different ways. There are pre-established vehicles that we utilize to buy certain things, but really, Crane, as big as it is with thousands of employees, anything you can think of, we're probably buying it. As already mentioned, Crane's divided up into 3 main mission areas. And that's why you're going to see, a lot of the autonomous systems, cyber, IT, AI, those types of things, just based on the mission sets that we support. So again, that's where the bulk of the dollars are going to be spent. Next slide, please. As I mentioned just a second ago, we're divided up into 3 main mission sets. There are 4 bullet points here, but I'll sum those up for you. So we have Expeditionary Warfare. So those are, SOCOM, Marine Corps, those folks. That's where we're buying a lot of product because we are still buying a lot of guns, bullets, explosive devices, sensors, those types of things to support those special missions. So that's where a lot of the supply dollars are spent in that Expeditionary Warfare. Electronic warfare, EW systems for ships, aircraft, and so a lot of like signal jamming, those types of things, RF, but we're also so there are some products, but we also once you get into there's a lot of services procured in support of electronic warfare. Now, strategic missions and corporate ops is rolled into strategic missions. So you've got a lot of strategic systems program office support, Trident systems, those types of things for strategic missions. Down in the corporate ops, it's just sort of the kind of the base operation. So environmental service contracts, base operation support services, HR support, business financial management, those kinds of things are what corporate operations are providing to the command. So again, lots of opportunity, lots of small business opportunity all across the base here. So next slide, please. kind of like Andy and some of the other folks have mentioned so far, I mean, this slide here is just to kind of capture the way the dollar thresholds for our procurement actions. 10,000 below are credit card acquisitions. Above 10,000 to 250, those are what we would call simplified acquisitions. Anything above $250,000, you get into, whether it be service or supply, you get into what we would consider our large contract world. Large contracts are broken into kind of two separate buckets. You have our traditional like sole source services or supply efforts are issued through Beta SAM. We just, internally we call them large contracts, and then anything that would be competitive technical services, we would issue via Seaport Next Gen, and all of those opportunities would be issued via the Seaport portal. So, if you're a service provider and you're not a Seaport prime contractor at the moment, there is an opportunity coming up at the end of calendar year 20 for what we call Seaport rolling admission to add new vendors to the vehicle. We'll advertise that on Beta SAM to give interested service providers the opportunity to provide a proposal to be added as a potential Seaport Prime vendor, because that's the only way, unless you're a Seaport Prime vendor, that's the only way you can, provide a prime proposal supporting any one of our, basically our competitive technical services. So, if you're not a prime holder, you can still work as a sub, but being a prime just opens up a lot of doors for you. So something to consider here over the next few months. Next slide, please. So how can you help? I mean, I don't think this is anything different than what's already been talked about. Just kind of research, if Crane's a place where you want to work, if Crane's a place that you want to support, obviously research what we buy. Attending events like this are great. You get an opportunity to learn about the ecosystem surrounding Crane, the ecosystem supporting Crane. You get to learn about what we buy and kind of what shapes our command. So having that information is important. Another thing that you might do to kind of get a better idea of what we buy, if you want to go to Beta SAM, go to contract opportunities at the top of the page and type in N00164. It'll bring up most of our procurement actions, and that will give you just a little better idea of what we're buying, command wide. So that's one way to research. If Crane is not the place for you, then identifying your target market within DoD. If you want to support the Navy, or you have an idea of the Navy is probably where your service or supply fits best, then I would recommend that you check out the Department of Navy Office of Small Business website. There's a lot of great information on there to kind of help guide you. You can see long-range acquisition forecasts. You can get a better idea of the NAICS codes that the Navy utilizes as far as where we're buying, how many dollars we're buying under those NAICS codes, those types of things. So it gives you a lot of good information to kind of help you in your research. And also on that Navy site, you can figure out who the local small business specialist is at that installation, to where you can possibly contact them to gather some more information about what opportunities are available for small business. Explore subcontracting opportunities. I always push this, especially if a company has no government contracting experience, that working as a sub is oftentimes a great way to get your feet wet. You kind of learn the system, you learn the process, and it just makes it much easier for you, moving forward. Provide effective responses to source of sought notices. Like I said, the government's going to issue a lot of source of sought notices, especially if it's a service, especially if it's something that we've never bought before. So always, so checking, Beta SAM, the Seaport portal, those types of things, and responding to those RFIs or those source of sought notices are extremely important, because we utilize that in our market research. And like I said, utilize that to hammer out that acquisition strategy as far as, are we going to set aside, are we going full and open, those types of things that are extremely important to
Matt, I think you went on mute for some reason. Might have hit a button or something.
I may have. I'm swinging my arms around a lot. I'm acting like I'm talking. So, apologize for that. But I'm not sure where I muted. But down to number 5 here. Just maintaining awareness and knowledge of the regulations. Like I said, those change a lot. A couple of things that I think are worth mentioning, and I think I mention it every time I do one of these. It's been talked about today. Partnering is huge. The small business rules have changed to make it easier to partner and make partnering and going after acquisitions much easier. Used to, a small business prime had to do above 50% of the requirement. Now multiple small businesses can partner together to meet that 50% requirement to then go after something. So the regs have changed, and I think they've become a little bit more small business friendly. So having awareness of those and being able to leverage those, I think, are extremely important to gaining access to government contracting. So think about those and try to establish some of those strategic partnerships. Next slide, please. Just some industry days. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, attending an event like this to gather information about Crane, about doing work with the federal government. These are just some outreach events that we typically do. The Buy Indiana Expo that we do every year down in French Lick. That's a great way to meet support partners and meet Crane personnel, the requirements personnel. APBI, Advanced Planning Brief for Industry, we'll have that in April of 2021. Training such as these, I still do my Tuesday meet and greets, obviously doing them virtually now just because of COVID. So we have a virtual option. We can do things over the phone. Still taking a lot of calls from small businesses interested in working, working with the federal government. So there's a lot of outreach opportunities, and there are a lot of ways that we, the government, are trying to reach industry to make them aware of what we're doing. So take advantage of those. Next slide, please. Just a couple of helpful websites, things that I've touched on so far. So we won't really go into that, but you can see you've got the Procurement Technical Assistance Center, Department of Navy Office of Small Business. Those types of sites are there for you to easily access. So I would recommend looking into those. Next slide, please. And there's my contact information. If you have any questions, if there are specific procurements that you're looking at, things of that nature, feel free to email or give me a call. So thank you for your time today, guys.
Oh, thank you, Matt. Hey, we're getting a little bit toward the end, but before you leave me, a quick question. A question from someone who's one of our guests who joined us this afternoon says, are S2 Smart's OTA transactions reviewed by the NSWC Crane Small Business Office? That would be you.
They're not. Nope.
Okay, I had a feeling that was the case. And then I don't know if this is for you or not, Matt, but I'm guessing it might be. Who's the point of contact at Crane for coordinating SBIR topics across the Warfare Center?
Hey, Julie, I think I responded to that question. This is Shadi.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, no, I think there's a hyperlink, I think, that I provided in one of my slides that shows all the POCs. And I think because of Crane is underneath NAVSEA, if I'm not mistaken, it's the NAVSEA point of contact.
Okay. Thank you. Well, Matt, again, thank you so much for your time. You're always a wealth of information. And so, again, as I said to Shadi, the penalty for doing a great job is you got to come back. So at any rate, next and last, we have Lawrence Walter. But before he starts, just again, encourage you to ask any questions you may have in the chat. And then also, as Anne asked at the beginning of her presentation, if you can let us know kind of what you want to hear about or who you'd like to hear from for upcoming events, please put them in the chat. We'll capture those. These events are for you, and we want to be responsive to your needs and what you want to hear and who you want to hear from, because only then we'll be successful. So just again, encourage you to offer up your ideas and to ask questions. And then, as I said, last but not least, we have Lawrence Walter with us. Lawrence serves as Vice President of Entrepreneurship for the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. And Lawrence, we're delighted you're here, so please take it away.
Yeah, thanks so much, Julie. I know that we're I'm at the end, tight time pressures here to close it out by 3, so I'll talk fast, probably compress some of my comments, and always happy to come back and speak to the group or answer questions. I'll have my contact information at the end of the slides here. So within IEDC, the Innovation Entrepreneurship Division, really have 3 main sort of verticals within that. The SBDC, led by David Watkins, I think has presented here today. PTAC sort of does similar stuff for defense. They're over off in the defense division. Then we have a policy wing, and then entrepreneurship, which is what I lead as the VP of entrepreneurship underneath the Chief Innovation Officer, Dave Roberts. Next slide. So just a little bit about how, we look at the world. We're really focused on venture scale companies, venture scale startups. And so this is the sort of general flow of how those businesses evolve in the ecosystem. And it's really our role to design programs and support the stakeholders and partners in Indiana that can help businesses reach that venture scale. So, we look at everything from, education programs to helping small businesses ideate and develop ideas that can form into venture backable companies. And then, we have programs like G Alpha and G Beta through Generator. These are accelerator programs, and we work with the Techstars groups and their efforts to help startups reach that sort of scale. And then all of that feeds into, other partners in the ecosystem like Elevate Ventures that can provide that early stage capital that's needed, to scale those businesses. And then at the end of the sort of chart there, if you graduate past that, then you're doing fantastic. You need growth capital, and the Next Level Fund, as a fund of funds run by 50 South, is there to support those sort of activities. So strategic sectors across, all of those stages that we're focused on. Ag, of course, aerospace and defense is a big one with the governor's mission for 3x over defense. We think that venture scale activity can really help meet that mission, and then the range of the other ones that you see right there. Next slide. I'm going to promote real quick a couple of strategic initiatives that we have underway. One is the 5G lab that is going to launch grand opening October 1st. It is live, it's working. So they are sustained download speeds of over a gigabit per second in the lab. It's live on the network, working with the major telcos. And if you have a project that requires, those types of communication testing, contact us. We'll get you in touch with the 5G lab. Next slide. We're really focused on advanced manufacturing. 3 things there. We have a studio lab coming soon. Can't reveal too much about that yet, but I will say that there's a number of really exciting partners. There'll be an RFP process. If you're in advanced manufacturing, you're going to want to learn more about that. Elevate Ventures has a fund, a new fund, 3 million, I think, or 2 million, focused on advanced manufacturing. I think they've made 1 or 2 investments out of that already, so that's very exciting. The Connexus grants, huge response to that. All the funds may be committed, but it just sort of shows that we're putting money into advanced manufacturing, and it's very important for the state. Next slide. Autonomous Challenge. This is just an amazing $1 million prize pool next year at the Motor Speedway. There's still time to get involved. If you go to the website, just Google that, then you look at the teams that are looking for partners. They've got a link on their website. you can get in touch with them, and you can partner with them, and you can be involved. A huge amount of talent that's going to be coming into the ecosystem around this, and it really is the cutting edge of technology. Lots of defense opportunity crossovers with the autonomous challenge. So next slide. International partnerships. I mean, this is like 2019. The state went like this. You can see here, like we have global reach at IEDC. So if you're looking to export your technology or work with partners from any of these countries that you see here, we can help. So call us. Next slide. There you go. That's my contact information, open for questions. And please feel free to reach out. Anything I can help you with.
Lawrence, you are nothing if not fast.
There you go.
And you gave great information in a really short period of time. So you mentioned the 5G lab and the innovation studio. Where are those located?
The 5G lab is downtown, like right across from the state capitol building on Ohio Street, where it's sort of co-located with the 1150 Academy. So, you've got talent and you've got testing labs all in that facility, but they also have a remote capability. So if you're not directly in the center of the state, then you can still work with the 5G lab. They can take equipment. They've got benches there. They set it up. They do their testing, and then they have a way for you to remote in and work on your stuff remote. So don't be put off if you're not in Indy. It's accessible across the entire state.
Great, thank you. Really appreciate your joining us this afternoon, everyone. All the presenters did a terrific job, and thanks all of our guests who joined us this afternoon. We hope that it's been helpful. Again, if you have some ideas about what you want to see and who you want to hear from, we certainly welcome your input, because as I said, this is for you and we want to be responsive to your needs. So I don't think there are any additional questions in the chat to answer. So again, just thanks for joining. We'll have another event next month, and in the meantime, stay safe and well, and we'll talk soon. Many thanks, guys, and thank you, Lawrence.
Thank you, Julie. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.